Well, continuing our talk with Colin Kniveton, who's been seconded for some months now down in Sark, but he's about to return. Mr. Kniveton, you're not going back to the job you thought you were going back to, though. That's the news that's broken today.
Indeed, and obviously a change is as good as a rest, as they say. So the opportunity to discuss this new role within the task force that's been established to review the scope of government was being discussed when prior to my departure, and all departments were engaged in the process of coming up with ideas as to how the scope of government could be reviewed in the light of obviously the overall budget rebalancing exercise. But it was only within the last 2 or 3 weeks that I was contacted by the Chief Secretary, who asked me if I would be interested in taking a further secondment away from Department of Economic Development to do this particular job. And after some discussions backwards and forwards, I agreed that it obviously made sense. It was said that a chief officer was needed. Obviously, I was coming back. A structure has been put in place to cater for my absence over the last 4 months. So I think it is certainly administratively convenient for me to be able to undertake the new role in the Chief Secretary's office. And I've got quite a lot of change management experience, which is the type of role that this job entails. And it's sort of ironic in a way that in Sark for the last 4 months, I've been trying to persuade the government to look at being more proactive in developing its economy and dealing with social and other matters and providing more services on Sark. And yet, probably going back to the Isle of Man now, it's a question of reviewing those services that government is providing and suggesting alternative means of doing that out with the public sector.
Well, I mean, I've known you for many years, and one thing I can say is that you can be in business very focused, and you can say that which way you want. But the fact is, you've got to make some big decisions, or that's what this is alluding to, isn't it? The big cuts and where they're going to happen, and it's going to be down to you to make some recommendations.
Yes, and I think within the guidelines that have been set, and the Chief Minister in particular has been very clear that what we're not talking about is necessarily wholesale privatisation. There are a number of different ways that this particular task can be approached. And what I will be doing is working with Minister Tier, who's actually going to head up the Council of Ministers subcommittee, and reporting through the Chief Secretary to the subcommittee on options for the politicians to ultimately make decisions. Because it doesn't matter if you're on Sark or you're an employee in a private sector company, or you're working on as a civil servant on the Isle of Man. Obviously, your role ultimately is to put forward options and recommendations from which the either board of directors or politicians or governing body or whatever can make the decisions that it feels are most appropriate.
Yeah, Mr. Bell keeps telling us there is no going to be slash and burn. He keeps saying that, none of that. But the fact of the matter is, this supertanker has to change direction, right?
Yeah, and I think obviously the real solution to this, if it can be found, is to make sure that the services that government is currently providing are provided in the same manner by a body other than government, and so that the public doesn't actually recognise that there has been any significant change. So I think that is if you can achieve that, then the job will have been well done. What you don't want is to return services to the private sector or come up with some other mechanism for delivering them, and the public immediately recognises that the service is not as good and it's not providing value for money. So there's a number of issues that I think you have to consider. And I think that the Chief Minister is absolutely correct in his assessment that there can't be simply this wholesale privatisation approach. It's got to be looked at in the round.
How long have you got to do this job for? Because, I mean, you're going towards retirement yourself, aren't you? So how long have you got?
Well, I'm leaving Sark on Friday, ferry permitting. It's still a bit blowy down here, but I'll be back on the island in the Chief Secretary's office on Monday morning, where I will be formally starting the new role, which is for 12 months. And after that, we'll obviously have to wait and see what progress is made during the 12-month period. At the end of that, then I will ultimately return to what is still my substantive role as the Chief Executive of the Department of Economic Development, which is a role I do very much enjoy, and hopefully at some stage there'll be the opportunity to return to there.
Well, safe journey. You've been missing a heat wave here in the Isle of Man, almost a drought for the last week, would you believe it? So we'll see you on your return.
Okay, thank you, Paul.